any questions before we start?
Get my email about that work.
I did skip it. Yep. Number 12 on the homework. The question actually ties into something different, so you can skip that one. Number 12 on the homework if you struggle with it. It's lacking some info. On chapter 2. Chapter 2 homework, number 12. So don't sweat it if you did it and didn't get it. So we are wrapping up international, and we will be getting started on some macro stuff today. So the last topic we're going to do in international is trying to figure out why people complain about trade if it's so good. And last time I had to do the eyeball trick. And when we did the eyeball trick with food, what happened to prices within each country? So what happened to prices within each country? So we had Japan and the United States. You guys can look back in your notes on the two graphs. What happened to prices? So first of all, let me pose a question here. Why do people complain about trade if it is a win-win for each country? That would be a great test question. Why do people complain about trade if it's a win-win for each country? That thing is screwed up. Oh, I see why it's clogged up. There's something jammed up in there. That's going to be ugly. Okay. What happens to prices when you open up for trade? Do they go up, down, or stay the same for both countries? Kind of a loaded question, right? What do? They go down. Down for one, up for the other. That's right. Good. So if you guys saw that, each time we engaged with trade, prices are going to change, number one, which means they're going to go up for one country and down for the other. Now, who likes high prices, consumers or producers? Do consumers like high prices or do sellers like high prices? Sellers. Sellers like high prices. Consumers like low prices. So within a country, if prices go up, who's going to gain? Sellers of the good or buyers of the good? Sellers. And consumers are going to lose, right? In the other country where prices fall, who wins within the country? Consumers or sellers? Consumers. Consumers like low prices. So we've uncovered a little bit of tension with international trade. What we proved was that both Japan and the United States win. International trade is a win-win situation for both countries overall. However, within the country, there will always be winners and losers because of prices changing, consumers liking low prices, sellers liking high prices. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So that's what ends up creating the tension within international trade, is that there's going to be winners and losers within each country. But what we learned is that the winners' wins outweigh the losers' losses. Okay? So let's kind of summarize that, and then we'll talk about it a bit more. So why do people complain? Well, prices change within each country post-trade, so after trade. Consumers like low prices. Producers like high prices. Therefore, regardless of whether price increases or decreases, there will be winners. Put that in quotes. I'm kind of keeping things general here. Winners and losers. There will be winners and losers within each country post-trade. And as we said, the last quote here, overall, we proved that the winners wins outweigh the losers' losses. Overall, we proved that the winners' wins outweigh the losers' losses because each country gains overall. So this is where we start to get into potential policy issues that countries often struggle with, is that we should probably open our borders to trade because we know we can win. And if we have a company that gets hurt or some employees in a particular industry that get hurt, then maybe we can have a program to compensate the loser for their losses, because long term we know that it's going to be something that's good for our country, right? So we might have programs that if we start losing manufacturing jobs in the United States because we opened up our borders and we have workers that used to be able to make refrigerators like no one else, and so now we're going to offer maybe some sort of education subsidy to those workers to get retrained into something that we do have a competitive and comparative advantage in. So for the United States, we have become a little more of a service-oriented, as far as the lower skilled jobs, a little more service-oriented jobs. And if you are wanting to get paid maybe some bucks that are similar to what you were getting paid as a manufacturing position, then you might need to get into something a little more high-tech, something computer-related, right? Something along those lines might be able to get you some income more similar to what you were making prior to losing your job to opening the borders. Okay, questions or comments on that? All right, so over time, countries have become creative on trying to figure out or barriers to trade. So let me relist or rethink here some barriers to trade. One of those things is a tariff. What's a tariff? A tax, yes. So a tariff was a tax on imports. So when those Toyotas come over to Seattle to come into a port or something, we're just going to zap them with a $1,000 bill. Before that Toyota touches U.S. soil, you're going to have to pay a tax. That's called a tariff. So we call it, the tax that's on imports is called a tariff. That, of course, creates a barrier to trade in general. We can also get into quotas. And a quota is a restriction on the quantity. Restriction on the quantity imported. Some non-tariff barriers that get involved here. So in general, we can look at other non-tariff barriers. We might just impose some government regulation on how the product was made. So in the United States, we tend to be more environmentally sensitive. And over in other countries, they might not have those laws. And so we might start to come up with policy that says, hey, if you're polluting too much as you produce this, we're not going to allow you to bring this into our country, right, as part of the protecting the environment. So we might have other types of barriers if they're, one of the contentious issues within the last year was pork and the pig producers here in the Kansas City area and the meat processing on what they're doing to their pigs, on how they raise their pigs, and how the product gets traveled. Does it meet our food standards in the United States? And so that can start to become a barrier. Now you can imagine who's going to be on the lobbyist trail to say that, oh yeah, we got to keep those Chinese pigs out of here because they're going to hurt us. Who's going to be funding that lobbying effort and putting a little bug in the politician's ear?
Local pig farmers.
The local pig farmers, right? So that's where we start to get into how this issue becomes political. Because often we'll have the losers from trade be a relatively small group. So as pig prices start to fall because we're opening up to the world, the pig farmers are the ones crying out, hey, you're costing us jobs, we're just poor American farmers, don't you believe in American farming, blah, 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 right? They're very vocal about it. But if we take into account how much bacon and ham is being consumed across the United States, and if we lower the price of bacon by even 5 cents a pound, how many millions of dollars is that benefiting the consumers, right? Compared to a small vocal group of U.S. domestic pig farmers. And so that group is much more able to organize themselves and to get into the politician's ear, whereas it's more unlikely to have the masses outcry about 5 cents in bacon. You just think that that's just kind of a normal fluctuation in the price. You're not going to become outraged and start getting local active groups here at Ottawa University and say, hey, everybody get on your phone, start calling people. You know, there's a non-tariff barrier going on, and I think it's going to affect prices by 5 cents. It's not worth your time, right? So it's not worth your time to put together those lobbying efforts, but it's well worth this special interest group's time to put it together. And so that's how these issues become very political and end up making the headlines, and the media can start to distort the harm that it's doing because they're leaving out the benefit. And the benefits are huge. This win-win part is the big thing. And so often as a second best alternative, we might start to develop programs to help the losers from trade. And that's where we start to get into interesting policy issues. All right. One of those arguments that are kind of anti-trade is called the infant industry argument. The infant industry argument. All right, so this is how this story goes. Maybe some small country, it could be small country, could be a big country, but typically a small country says, you know, we could be competitive on the world market for DVD players, but we just can't get our foot in the door because there's all these big existing companies like Sony and over in Japan, and but you know, I think if we're Indonesia, we could really, you know, make some money doing this. And so the government says, yeah, and this is after maybe a bit of a lobbying effort on an industry, although it can be very much a government who is trying to figure out how to stimulate growth, and they might think that they have an edge in a particular industry as well, and then start to partner in with industries. And the argument says, let's protect the industry, with tariffs and non-tariff barriers, NTBs, which a quota, by the way, falls into that too. Anything that's non-tariff. Taxing at the border was kind of the most common form of barrier, and so we kind of lump all the other ones into non-tariff barriers. So protect the industry, who's just a baby, they're just an infant. We gotta coddle our little infant here, right? We're gonna protect the industry with tariffs and non-tariff barriers until the baby gets big and can compete globally. Compete globally without protection. Sounds pretty good, but there's some issues. What issues do you see with that type of philosophy or that thought here on allowing time for an industry to mature so that it can grow up and compete on the global scene? What do you think? Give me a number between 7 and 15.
11.
11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. What do you think? What are some issues maybe with that? Do you got the concept down? Okay.
They're on their own, so they don't really know what it has to do.
Okay, so if they're on their own, they might not know as well, so we give them the protection, right, to allow them to learn. That's how the argument goes. Well, what are some issues related to that on giving them some help, giving them some protection? Maybe they do finally learn, as well as Sony, on how to make DVDs or whatever the problem is. What are some issues that might result after we get to that point where they are starting to learn? And
the company will still lobby for the advantage once they hit a certain point.
okay, so the company will still lobby for the advantage even after they make it to a certain point, right? So try to imagine that we've got this in place and they've been having their prices domestically protected by tariffs or other things, such that a DVD player within their country is selling for $120, whereas globally they tend to be selling for about $80, right? So imagine that it's time that, okay, we've got this figured out, we've protected the industry. When we reach that point, are they going to willingly say, okay, yep, let's have price cut from 120? So it's kind of hard to get the baby off the bottle is the problem that we find with these. You know, even if we have kind of a sunset date, so often we'll have Well, this is a 5-year program. Does 5 years sound good for you, DVD industry? Oh yeah, 5 years would be fine. We'll be able to compete on the global scene in 5 years. Thumbs up, no problem. So then here we are in 2014. Come 2018 and 19, they say, well, that was our deal, 5 years. Oh, but wait a second, we're going to lose jobs. Look at, we've built this up to having 2,000 people. And we're just entering this new thing. You know, DVD players have changed a little bit over time. And so now we just need about 3 more years to kind of get into this, right? You can see how it's hard to take the bottle away from the baby as we start to go through time. And so that's what happens with these infant industry arguments, or tends to happen, is that even if there's a sunset date on the policy, it's hard to take them off of it because they start to become dependent on it, right? If they're getting $120 a DVD player, well, there's a lot of labor and overhead and machines and all the costs of doing business is all embodied in that $120. That's kind of what they've been used to for the last 5 years. It's pretty difficult to change if they're not really planning on it. And then, of course, if they've gotten in deeper and deeper in bed with their politicians, then they start to think it'll be easier and easier to get that passed through that, oh, well, they're not going to let jobs be taken away from this industry, right? So, and maybe even politically, that'll be easier to pass to the voters as they gone over time, because now we're just helping jobs. Whereas that might not have been even the place to go to in the first place. All right, so let me jot that one down here. So let's put problem. Get some ink going here. So problem, or problems. 1, hard to take the bottle away from baby. Hard to take the bottle away from baby because baby cries. Baby cries when the bottle